Somewhere in Ocala, a stallion most people, even inside the industry, rarely talk about, just sired the highest-grossing foal in a regional sale. There was no announcement, no polished marketing video, no celebratory headline in a trade journal. The buyer flew in from Monterey, wired the equivalent in cash, signed the papers, and was gone before lunch. That is how this actually works. Not under arena lights, not in televised finals. In quiet barns, in paperwork, in timing. The horse in that stall was not just athletic potential. It was positioning. A piece in a larger genetic structure that determines which bloodlines will shape American competition horses over the next decade and a half. Maybe longer. Texas understood that early. Florida arrived later and then accelerated. The American Quarter Horse Association tracks more than 3 million registered animals. 3 million! The largest breed registry on Earth. But registry size is noise. Influence sits higher in the pedigree, in which stallions repeat, which crosses survive market cycles, which names buyers circle before they even see the horse. That influence is expensive. Stud fees, embryo rights, frozen semen contracts that trade like commodities. It does not show up in a single headline transaction. It compounds, quietly, over years. Two states are competing for that compounding position. One has been doing it since before the other recognized the scale of the game.
The tension is visible if you know where to look. In sale averages that drift upward without explanation,
in competition programs that start repeating the same sire lines, in the geography of serious money when it moves. And it moves. There was a moment, around 2011, when a single Texas ranch controlled breeding rights to stallions whose offspring landed in the top 20 of 4 separate major competitions at the same time. 4 disciplines, 1 ownership cluster. That level of concentration distorted the market. Buyers who wanted access to competitive genetics discovered that their options were narrower than they had assumed. Stud fees adjusted. The ranch did not apologize. Florida operations noticed. Some of them were young then, barely a decade into serious breeding. They did not try to outscale Texas. That would have been slow. Instead, they looked for pressure points, where volume could be vulnerable, where repetition could become predictability, where predictability could become opportunity. The contest between Texas and Florida is not theatrical. It does not resolve into winners and losers on a scoreboard. It unfolds through breeding books, through data sets, through which stallion names begin appearing more often than they should. And once you start looking for that pattern, it becomes difficult to unsee. The King Ranch didn't begin as a breeding operation. It began as a survival plan that happened to harden into an institution. Richard King bought his first land in 1853. That date shows up in plaques and histories like a clean origin point, but the reality was messier. Land was risk. Water was risk. Disease was risk. And the horse, back then, wasn't a lifestyle symbol. It was a tool that either worked or got replaced. Texas bred quarter horses the way it built everything else, through repetition, scale, and a kind of stubborn continuity that outsiders mistake for romance. It wasn't romance. It was selection pressure. Work first, winning later, if winning came. That sequence mattered because it shaped what Texas valued: durability, soundness, temperament, recovery. Traits that look boring on paper until you watch a horse hold up across heat, dust, miles, and time. Texas didn't need a lab to tell it what a horse was. Texas had pasture. Texas had years. Then genetics started naming itself. King, Leo, 3 bars. Those names don't feel like marketing. They feel like infrastructure, because that's what they became in Texas hands. Bloodlines absorbed, multiplied, reinforced. Not a single moment, a long accumulation. Dock Bar is the pivot people mention, and they're not wrong. Foaled in 1956, technically a California horse. But influence doesn't follow birthplace, it follows mare bands and land. Texas had both. So Texas took what Dock Bar could do and made it structural. Layered him into programs until the origin story stopped mattering and the outcomes did. That's the pattern. Texas doesn't just adopt, Texas normalizes. There's also a cost to that approach. Slow movement, a reluctance to pivot, sometimes an almost deliberate refusal to chase what's new. From the outside, it reads like conservatism. Inside, it functions like a filter. Florida didn't have that kind of foundation waiting in the soil. It didn't have a century of bloodline networks and inherited relationships that operate like informal banks. Florida's advantage came from somewhere else, and it arrived later. Climate, land development, and proximity to a different kind of money. Not cattle money, horse money. By the 1980s, and then hard into the 1990s, Marion County and the Ocala region started building a horse ecosystem that looked less like a ranching culture and more like a performance campus. Veterinary clinics that ran like research hospitals. Reproduction specialists trained in systems Texas ranchers weren't even watching. Sales operations modeled after thoroughbred pipelines rather than agricultural markets. That infrastructure changed what breeding meant. In Florida, stallion rosters didn't come from inheritance. They came from acquisition. Buy proven genetics at peak value, market it aggressively, manage the book, rotate, extract return. It's not that Florida made better horses. That's the wrong frame. Florida made a different transaction. A horse packaged for buyers who want documentation, measurable performance signals, and a clear thesis about return. The environment shaped the product. The buyer shaped the pitch. For a while, both models lived side by side without direct friction. The disciplines stayed in their lanes. The buyers stayed in their lanes. A cutting horse buyer in 2007 wasn't scanning Florida reining prospects. It wouldn't have made sense. Then the market started blending. Performance metrics became standardized. Genomic testing became accessible. Buyers began comparing across regions and disciplines the way they compare investments. And that's when it stopped being parallel. It became contact. In 2019, the Adequan Select Sale in Fort Worth posted an average just under $62,000. That number traveled fast, not because of a record-breaking outlier, but because the median held. The floor had risen. When the floor rises, confidence isn't speculative, it's structural. Texas read it as validation. Buyers were still showing up, still paying premiums for familiar pedigrees, still treating Texas provenance as a signal of durability rather than nostalgia. The narrative was simple. The system works. Except markets don't move in single locations. That same fall, in Ocala, the OBSC sale operated differently. Less volume, different buyer profile, but a disproportionate concentration of high-end transactions. Horses crossing the 100,000 threshold that carried pedigrees a Texas rancher 20 years earlier might not have recognized. Crosses built less on inherited reputation and more on measurable athletic return. Embryo programs were part of that shift. Multiple foals per season from a single mare, controlled pairings, rapid iteration. It wasn't just about producing more horses. It was about accelerating feedback. More offspring meant faster data. Faster data meant earlier decisions about what to repeat and what to abandon. Texas programs, built historically around natural cover and single full cycles, generated results differently. Slower, broader, sometimes deeper, but not compressed. Compression changes behavior. Buyers began asking questions they hadn't asked before. Not who sired him, but how many full siblings exist. Not has this cross worked once, but has it worked 3 times in 2 years? There was a stallion in Central Florida, his name isn't the point, who between 2014 and 2021 produced 3 NRHA Futurity champions. Not consecutive, not dominant in volume, just statistically disruptive. From a deliberately restricted book of mares, limited supply, high hit rate. That ratio mattered more than his marketing.
The stud fee didn't climb gradually. It jumped, then jumped again, then closed. Texas farms with established stallions in the same discipline started fielding uncomfortable questions. Quiet ones. Buyers asking about strike rates, about measurable output per foal crop. Some of those conversations didn't have clean answers. Here's where it gets less tidy. The Florida model's emphasis on scarcity
Let's analyze the
created
data.
pricing
If we look at the
pressure
trade-offs
upward,
here, strategy
but it
A
also
involves higher
introduced
risk,
volatility.
but the yield
The narrow
projections are
genetic
significantly better
strategy
than
hits
strategy
hard
B.
when it works. It misses visibly when it doesn't. Texas volume smooths variance. Florida precision amplifies it. Different risk profiles, same industry, and risk has started to matter more. Serious buyers increasingly want predictive tools before they commit capital. Genomic testing, still imperfect, still debated, offers something Texas historically didn't prioritize: early signal extraction. Florida operations integrated it faster because their infrastructure was already centralized and medicalized. The labs were nearby. The specialists were embedded. That doesn't mean Texas ignored it. It means Texas integrated it later and often selectively. The deeper shift isn't in sales averages, it's in expectation. Buyers now assume that breeding programs should explain themselves in data terms. They want probability curves, not anecdotes. When expectation changes, power migrates. Not completely, not permanently, but measurably. The farms that anticipated that migration captured margin early. The ones that trusted inertia are still recalibrating. Recalibration in a market that moves this quickly is rarely neutral. Nothing has been decided. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either selling something or reading outdated numbers. Texas still carries weight that cannot be replicated quickly. Volume. Registered horses. Generations of breeders who aren't experimenting because they don't need to. The infrastructure is dense. Mare bands, training programs, buyer networks that operate on memory as much as metrics. In parts of the hill country, bloodlines are discussed the way other families discuss land deeds. It's not branding, it's inheritance. And inheritance is difficult to displace. But relevance is different from weight. Florida's position isn't built on ancestry, it's built on adaptation. The buyers entering the market now are not the same buyers who shaped it 15 years ago. They're younger, more analytical, less sentimental about where a horse was bred. They want data sets. They want production ratios. They want to know what the cross has done in the last 3 years, not what it meant 20 years ago. That shift matters more than geography. Look at stallion rosters today and you'll see something uncomfortable. Cross-pollination. Texas farms acquiring Florida-proven genetics. Florida programs emphasizing heritage bloodlines in their marketing copy. The lines are not dissolving, but they are bending. Neither state has secured a permanent advantage. In cutting, Texas still occupies structural ground. The NCHA Futurity results continue to reflect long-established breeding pipelines, but margins are tightening. In reining and ranch disciplines, Florida-influenced programs have captured attention in ways that would have seemed improbable not long ago. And then there's what's coming. Genomic selection is still early in performance horses. When it matures, and it will, the advantage will shift toward whoever has built the cleanest data infrastructure. That may not be Texas. It may not be Florida. It may be a third player, quietly compiling performance correlations that neither state has fully mapped yet. Markets don't reward tradition alone. They don't reward innovation alone either. They reward alignment with what buyers expect next. The horses being bred in 2025 will carry those expectations inside their DNA. Some of them will define the next decade. Most won't. That ratio has never changed. What has changed is how quickly the market reacts. Texas still commands scale. Florida still commands precision. Neither commands certainty. And certainty is what serious capital ultimately chases. If you want to track where that certainty begins to consolidate, not in headlines, but in pedigrees, subscribe. The next investigation goes deeper than averages and surface wins, because the map isn't finished, and neither is this.